Welcome to this week's episode. I'm Paula Williams.
John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
to help all you ladies and gentlemen out there sell more products and services in the aviation world.
Absolutely. So last episode we talked about reasons you should do a webinar. Today is the cautionary tale, or the reverse of that. 6 reasons that bad webinars fail.
Well, if they're webinars, they don't not bad unless they fail, right?
That is true, but there are bad webinars. I'm sure you've been to some, right?
Yes, I have.
All right. So let's not do that. Okay. So this episode is brought to you by our webinar service, where we help you put together in collaboration a fabulous webinar that is really going to be compelling for your ideal customer and help demonstrate your product or service and explain why you are the best option for them. And it's really good for complex products and services in the aviation industry, and really helps move that sales process along. And we do a lot of the technical and weird stuff and help you do what you're good at, which is demonstrating your product and showing it in the best possible light, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So last week we talked about webinars versus trade shows, and that's probably the best comparison of, there are 2 ways really to demonstrate a complex product or service. People love to get their hands on things. People love to see things work, and a trade show is probably the very best, and it's certainly the most traditional way of making that happen. But there are a couple of things that are shortcomings for trade shows, right? Webinars are COVID-19 proof, right?
Can you imagine NBA and trying to keep 6 feet between you and everybody else out there?
Exactly. This sea, I can just envision this sea of navy blue suits, all 6 feet apart, and then going out into the parking lot 6 feet apart with dots on the floor.
And trying to find a restaurant that's open.
Oh, heavens. Exactly. No, I don't think it certainly shows this summer are going to be impacted by the COVID-19 situation. So webinars are also weatherproof, right? Like Hurricane Harvey in 2017, which really impacted attendance at the Florida shows. I'm sure there's been a lot of aviation shows over the years that have been impacted by weather, so that's not the only one that was disappointing.
Right.
They are rules proof. If you have seen the exhibitor guide from any of these big shows and all of the things that you can and can't do.
Mostly it's what you can't do.
Right. You're paying a lot of money for not being able to do a lot of things, right? Okay. Competition proof. If you run a webinar, it is your show, and you control the agenda, and you invite people that you want to come.
Right.
You're not competing with the big kids with the shiny objects that everybody wants to go see. You're not competing with the marching bands and musicians and cocktail hours that are going on elsewhere in the convention. You get to keep your customers interested and talking about your product or service. They're expiration proof. So, you do a webinar and you get to keep the recording and you get to continue to use that long after the fact. It's inflation proof, meaning costs of trade shows are going up by the year.
Oh, every year they go up.
Right. And but there are some bad things that can happen with webinars. So, those were the good things, the differences between a trade show and a webinar. Some of the bad things are, you are the only one who is responsible for inviting people to this webinar and making sure that you fill the room. When you go to a trade show, you're sharing that responsibility with everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have to do a good enough job of marketing to get the butts in the seats, right?
So to speak. Right.
So, we need to have the people invited to the webinar. They have to know about it. They have to understand why it will benefit them to spend the time to come to this webinar. We have to offer something that is of value in order to make that not be a flop, right?
Yes.
Okay. Flop number 2 is that your webinar could be really boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to talk about how to avoid these 2 kinds of flops, either, not having anyone show up or having it be terribly boring. Okay. So how to avoid attendance flops. your webinar has to sound like more fun than the donor party, right? And there's a cartoon on the screen for those of you who are listening. You're invited to the donor party. It'll be a cool time. All you can eat until all the guests are gone. So it's possibly an inside Mormon joke. I don't know if that's other people know about the donor party, do they?
Oh, I'm sure they do. That was...
Right. It was a news event in the westward expansion of the United States where a group of settlers got stranded and theoretically ate each other. At least that's the urban legend. And so, yeah, your webinar should not be that dire. Okay. So ways to avoid attendance swaps. You want to start planning at least 4 weeks in advance start advertising at least 4 weeks in advance. You want to sell the webinar as diligently as if people were paying to attend. So you want to get your sales guys on the phone inviting people to the webinar, which is actually a much easier call to make than a sales call. You know, buy my product is a harder pitch than we're having a webinar on June 3rd and we'd like you to come. You want to use multiple media to invite people. And you want to invite enough people because only a small percentage is actually going to be available at that day and time and is going to be interested in your particular product or service.
Yeah, because you're going to have to pick a day and time. Mm-hmm. And all these people may want to be there, but only a portion of them will be able.
Right. And there's a lot of statistics that we can use to help us figure out the right day and time. Usually the middle of the week is better. Usually late morning is better. There's lots of things that we can look into in terms of, are your ideal customers East Coast or West Coast? How can we make that the best possible time? But still, it's not going to be convenient for everybody.
Right.
Okay. So how to avoid boring flops. Number one is to invite the right people because there are some people that will find your topic fascinating, no matter how obscure or how detailed or how nerdy you get. There is a group of people that is really interesting in that topic, right?
Yep, and they're going to say, are you kidding me? That's for real? Mm-hmm. Regardless of what it is.
So you want to make sure that you're going to invite people who really are your ideal customers, and those are people who are really going to be interested in your product.
Exactly.
Okay. And we can talk about how to narrow that down. Demographics, psychographics, geography, size of company, position in the company. There's lots of ways that we can drill down on that, and that's part of the process that we go through.
And that's part of what we help you with.
Exactly, when we're setting up your webinar. Second thing is you want to make big promises and fulfill them. So you want to say, by the time you leave this webinar, you will know X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And it has to be useful information, whether they become your customer or not. So, for example, this podcast, you're going to know the two biggest ways that webinars can flop and how to avoid it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something that's useful whether you become an ABCI customer or not. The third thing is you want to provide handouts and valuable content so that they will want to show up and they're going to want to get a checklist or a guideline or something that is useful to them in their job, right?
Yep, you can do some of this with snail mail, you can do some of it with email, you can do some of it online.
Exactly.
During the webinar.
Exactly. Right. You can do almost all of it online, but we do recommend postcards in addition to that because mixed media is more credible and more effective. And then the last one is you want to tell stories rather than providing a bunch of statistics, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can have a happy customer telling their story, this is how we use this product, and these are the results that we got. Or you want to go through some of our old podcasts about how to tell a story and relate that in a way that has a beginning, a middle, and an end so that it makes sense and so that it is a narrative that people really get sucked into and need to find out how it ends, right?
Yep.
Okay. Something wrong?
Nope. I would just thought I had some things wired wrong.
Uh-oh.
We have to do this all over again.
Oh, heavens. That will not happen during your webinar. Actually, we do a lot of double checking for our podcasts and for other things just to make sure that we don't have technical problems, right?
Yep.
Okay. Or if we do, then, the best thing to do is keep a good sense of humor about it and carry on, and we will find a way to work through it and get around it. So the show must go on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that being said, tell stories rather than give boring statistics. Here are some statistics. Okay.
Hopefully they aren't boring.
Right, exactly. And we shared these last week as well. 73% of B2B marketers say that webinars are the best way to generate high-quality leads. 61% of B2B marketers rate webinars as the most effective content marketing strategy and use them for lead generation, thought leadership, training, internal communications, and more. And 28% of registrations occur after the webinar is over. So those have a lasting value. Even after the date of your webinar, you still have that recorded webinar on your website, or that people can still get access to.
Right.
So we'll talk through all of the whys and wherefores and hows and how-tos and everything else in an upcoming webinar. Right. And so the date and time is TBD, but we've given a lot of webinars in the past, and they've always been a really good opportunity for us to connect with people and to help people understand a particular concept or situation, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So once again, this episode has been brought to you by our webinar product. It's specifically designed to help you sell a product or service in the aviation industry. So this is not for technology, this is not for software, this is not for any of those things, unless it is in the aviation industry and for aviation people, right?
We're aviation specific in everything we do.
Absolutely. So we manage the tools and tech for you. You don't have to know all that stuff. You don't have to buy all the tools and everything else. We'll walk you through how to set up your equipment, usually using things that you already have or things that are reasonably cost or have a reasonable cost for your situation. And so on. John's really good at doing the hardware consultation end of this sort of thing. So,
I am.
Of course you are. Setting up your lighting and your sound and everything else to make sure that it's going to be the quality that you want.
Well, I haven't made all the mistakes, but I made a lot of them.
Exactly. We do coaching and rehearsals to help you become more comfortable doing the webinar and using the tools, which you won't really have to do. We manage a lot of the chat rooms and other kinds of things that are going on while your webinar is happening. So all you have to focus on is talking to your customers and demonstrating your product, which is what you do anyway, right?
Right.
Okay. We do all the advertising and invitations and everything else, and we do all of the follow-up. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Stay wealthy. Talk to you later.
Stay wealthy?
Healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Absolutely. See you next time.